You can't have media if you don't have leaders. And you can't have leaders if you don't organize. And we need this mass organizing in this moment. It is really critical that we do the organizing and we do the leadership development to keep and sustain a movement that can challenge the system and that can create a real change under the human
Harriet
rights.
Tubman said that I freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed 1,000 more if only they had known they were slaves.
How do you build the organizational forms that the working class needs in this current period? And you know, basically sort of some of the things that we discovered and learned and theorized, I guess, eventually. We always focus on aggressive mass organizing, right? We always have a mass organizing tool, but always has to be some way that you can go and invite people.
When I began organizing in Philadelphia like 6 or 7 years ago, what we noticed was taxi drivers hadn't had a meter increase in 14 years. There was 5 taxi drivers that were murdered in a 12-month period. And when we began organizing, what we noticed was taxi drivers, like 85–90% of them were first-generation immigrants coming from every nation across the globe, coming from every religion across the globe. So we was like, well, how can we organize if we coming from all different
And
nations?
the other kind of collaboration that's going on here is us taking a role in leading and helping build the media communication strategy of all the other groups.
So much of our work is about developing leaders so that we can first end poverty in people's minds, that we have to win the hearts and minds of people before we can end poverty in fact.
Like, why I'm making this party wage? Why I am going to these issues? Why the system always tell me that it's my fault because I didn't went to school, because I'm too lazy, because I prefer to receive social services. It's people that can understand that the problem that we are fighting against is not the stadium. It is not the government. It is not just Wall Street. It is a huge system that is that have the structure to keep people in poverty. And that is what the United Workers is always more interested in develop those leaders that understand that problem. And based on that understanding, we can create strategies, we can create plans, we can execute plans in order to challenge the system and change the system.
So we started looking for the leaders from each of these communities, of these religious groups and stuff like that. And we began having meetings, and sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, sometimes we was butting heads. But eventually, we reached enough consensus where we could start moving together. So the first thing we did was, okay, we said, okay, let's just shut down for half an hour, see what happens. So we went to the train station, and the taxi drivers stopped working for half an hour. And a miracle happened. We got a call from Harrisburg that said, okay, we're going to give you a 20-cent meter increase. You know, so it was just the beginning of believing that if we work together, that we could cross, we could make things
And
happen.
so what we're talking about is actually a systematic identification, education, and training of leaders in a network. And those leaders that are networked together are what's going to provide the strategic direction for this movement to end
How
poverty.
we are speaking the same language because we are human beings and we are fighting for this
It's, you know, we really
human
sort of
rights.
approach media as an organizing tool, as a way for people to tell their stories through the media to affect the broader discourse.
And so we are really fighting for the idea that leadership development and political education have to be at the center of the organizing work that we're doing, and that we have to use struggle as a school. That in struggle, we're identifying leaders that are emerging out of struggle, and throwing resources into developing and uniting those leaders. So there has to be this dialectical relationship. There has to be this creative tension between the struggle in which people are engaged in and political education that we both have to teach as we fight, and that we have to learn.
So on the struggle that we've been having, we knew that we needed other allies. We couldn't do it by ourselves. So we started connecting with like the Philadelphia Student Union, connected with the Media Mobilizing Project, because our story told. We connected with the Poverty Initiative. We connected with the New York Taxi Works Alliance up here. And through the New York Taxi Works Alliance, that relationship, we was able to start connecting with other taxi drivers across the country.
And And I think the statewide push, I think a lot of that has, we've been able to like imagine that and see that in our work with the Vermont Worker Center and kind of a model for like really innovative statewide organizing that, includes these concepts of, like lots of like real leadership development, media work, and like organizing based on human rights values, right? Not just on a specific campaign, but what kind of society, what kind of values are we working for?
And so I think that vision piece that looks at people's values and to people's personal experience, right? I mean, healthcare and human rights, it's not only a great universal organizing issue, but it also, it's about our bodies and our loved ones.
So, United Workers is organizing for fair development around the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, but that has a real connection to the healthcare fight in Vermont, which has a real connection to the Philadelphia Student Union in Philly and the Media Mobilizing Project. Even though all of our different fronts of struggle look very different, what we're actually fighting for within the Poverty Scholars Program is a highly centralized strategic consensus that we are fighting for the unity of the dispossessed as the dispossessed. And so we're doing that in several different ways through the statewide collaborative, particularly sharing political education plans, sharing best practices. You'll note that the Put People First campaign has been taken up by various organizations within the statewide collaborative. And so there's both this strategic consensus that we're fighting for and all the sharing that we're doing. So this isn't just a loose coalition of groups that are coming together, but this is actually operating from a real place of strategy that we have to unite across these lines of division that have always kept us divided.